Hey, your viewers and viewresses, my name is General Red Strategist, and welcome back to So You're Being Hunted. This is episode 343 now. So, this is the third episode in my current So You're Being Hunted recording session. This and the last two were all recorded one straight after the other. Another podcast-style episode then today, ladies and gentlemen. I've got an interesting topic of conversation that I kind of wanted to talk about, get off my chest. It actually relates to that of a couple of episodes ago. So you know how in episode 341 I was actually talking about TED Talks videos that I've been watching recently here on YouTube about all manner of subjects. Admittedly, that one got a little bit weird, but it kind of relates basically to that, except it's not weird. It's actually more to do with science than anything else. So, you know, I mentioned in episode 341 how I've been watching various TED Talks videos, like, for example, the one by Vijay Kumar, whatever his name was, on robotics, the Mark Gallo one from 2009, or whatever it was, on deep sea creatures, and there was an interesting one I actually came across. I've forgotten the name of the woman now who was presenting it, which is a bit embarrassing, but in essence, it was about the Dragonfly project. So for anyone who doesn't know what this is a planned mission that's going to be sending a probe to Titan, which is one of the moons of Saturn, if I'm not mistaken. And I just thought it was an interesting video because well, obviously, I mean, it ties into a subject which is generally very interesting in its own right, which is obviously space research and space exploration and whatever else have you. But so for anyone who doesn't really know anything about the Dragonfly project, it's not launched yet. It's planned, I believe, to launch in 2027. So there's still a fair few years to go yet on the planning side of things to make sure everything's prepped up and ready to go. But obviously, once it does take off in 2027, it'll be heading for Titan. And the estimates of how long it will take to get there are about sort of 9 years, something like that. So it's hypothesized that it probably won't arrive at Titan until, 2036, which is a crazy amount of time, really, when you think about it. It's almost 10 years, which almost 10 years may not sound like much, but in the grand scheme of a human life, that's a fair chunk of your life, that is. But, yeah. And so the whole kind of rationale, really, I believe, about the Dragonfly project is to just kind of take samples and measurements of Titan's surface. Because what's interesting about Titan, I believe, is that as a moon, it's covered, well, there's supposed to be large kind of seas, oceans, lakes of liquid methane and stuff like that. And it's one of those kind of fascinating locations which I think scientists would love to be able to study. And I can certainly see why. I mean, it's such a kind of far out celestial body. You know, you're getting way beyond Jupiter, you're getting way beyond the asteroid belt. You're getting to that other kind of side of the solar system where things are a whole lot different to what they are like over in our kind of half, where Earth is. But, you know, it was just an interesting video overall, and it's well worth a watch. But it kind of ties in, really, I think, to kind of space to interest in space exploration in general, and I'm very much interested in that kind of thing. I like watching videos sometimes online to do with space exploration, stuff like that. For example, like there's a video by Wired that I once watched on YouTube with astronaut Chris Hadfield talking about some kind of general sort of questions about what it's like to be in space, stuff like this. And it's just overall very fascinating. Now, the only thing I found with that TED Talk video about the Dragonfly project and about Titan, of course, you know, if you scroll down into the comments, it just turns into absolute cancer because you just get a load of freaking people who are all like, you know, oh, what's the point of space exploration and research? We should solve all the problems here on Earth first. And it's like, well, no. Why should we do that? Because there's fucking masses of problems here on Earth. If we tried to solve all the problems here on Earth before we started space exploration, we'd be waiting potentially hundreds of years. So it's not going to happen, you know. Besides, why do we have to do one before the other? I just want to get that off my chest kind of straight away, because that's something I never understood about people who detract from the value of space exploration. Why exactly? I just don't. I get it. There's huge problems here on Earth that need solving and things like that, but that shouldn't detract from our scientific curiosity to find out more about the neighbourhood of the universe and this sort of thing, the neighbourhood in which our planet exists, about the wider universe in which we exist. That should not be a reason for not doing that. But I'll never understand that line of argument. It's like, usually the other kind of one you sometimes see in comment sections is, oh, what's space research ever done for us? Well, a lot of things, if you bother to fucking Google it. There's so much stuff. If it's not comments like that, it's then the people who claim that everything scientists do is all some kind of indoctrinating propaganda. And I just think to myself, alright, if you fucking want to believe that, go ahead. You can. I'm sorry. But you know me, I'm not a big fan of conspiracy theories, stuff like that. And part of that is because obviously I'm an academic, and I'm a big sort of empiricist and all that. I'm a big believer that evidence should be weighed very carefully. You've got to look for evidence before you make a conclusion. You've got to actually critically examine that evidence in order to make sure it's actually, strong, decent, reliable, that its provenance can be verified and whatever else have you, or at least verified to a reasonably confidence-inspiring degree. But yeah, space exploration is fascinating overall. At the end of the day, it's done a lot for us. Without space exploration, there'll be technologies that we don't have. GPS, sat-nav. Hell, there's even I think things as mundane as things like toothpaste, which have apparently had some input from space research and stuff like that. So actually, no, it has a huge impact on your life. Communications, stuff like that, satellite comms, weather monitoring, these kind of things, which are heavily dependent, to a certain extent, on techniques and technologies which have been founded about through space research. So it's actually vital stuff, that is. But, getting away from obviously the more kind of cynical people who, can't seem to see beyond the end of their own nose, to put it like that, I do sometimes, when I kind of think about sort of space research, there's all kinds of celestial bodies out there which will be fascinating to a scientist, to an astronomer, to somebody who is interested in that kind of thing. And, Titan is just one of many that's interesting. And what's interesting, of course, is that obviously a large part of space research is driven by the ultimate dream of having humans settle on another world. So, everyone will kind of point to Mars or the Moon as being potential sites of interest. But at the same time, it's also interesting for space research to be looking further out at planets which are more kind of Earth-like in their physical properties as potential sites not only where humans could live, but where other life could also evolve. And, studying places where life could evolve, we could learn all kinds of stuff from that, about biology, about the nature of life itself. Does that not fascinate you, in essence? Don't you want to learn more about that? But yeah, I don't really know where I'm kind of going with this discussion, but I'm just kind of rambling as I usually do in these sort of videos, just because I find the topic so interesting. And some things that I do sometimes see on scientific videos about this idea of finding life on other planets. A typical question I sometimes see comes up is, why do we humans sometimes assume that other life forms in the universe would be similar to us? Well, it's not, I would say, that we assume that. It's that we know that under Earth-like conditions that we live in, life can evolve. If you want, basically, proof of that, well, look at yourself in a mirror. You are a life form, are you not? You evolve, your species evolved on this planet. Water and chemicals, that are on this planet play a large role in the evolution of life here on Earth, and in sustaining that life as well. So, is it not reasonable, therefore, for scientists to look for Earth-like planets? because we know we have a formula for life already, which is, our own planet. So it makes sense, therefore, to look for the Earth-like planets, because those are certainly locations where, theoretically, we could find some form of life. Whether that's intelligent or just, animal or microbial or floral-based life, who knows? But that's the logic behind it. But of course, that's not to say that scientists don't kind of acknowledge that in the kind of vastness of the universe, life may actually not look entirely different based on physical properties of other planets and whatever else have you. But like I say, it's just about the fact that we already know that we have a good sort of formula here on Earth for what life can evolve in. Right. It's just, sorry, I'm just approaching this device piece over here whilst also at the same time trying to ramble in my usual way about this topic. It's like I'm devoting my brain between two tasks. Oi. Come here. There we go, got him. Jeez. Right, now that I've dealt with him, I can sort of get back to my train of thought, as it were. So, Earth-like planets are the first kind of candidates for life in the universe, for that kind of study. And the thing is, if you kind of know anything about that search for life, you know that scientists obviously have what they call that sort of Goldilocks zone. Is it me, or have I just come across a lot of buildings here with strange scanners in them? It feels like every other map I've ever played in this game, strange scanners are really rare, and it's suddenly on this one, I feel like I've seen about 3 of them so far. Kind of crazy. But yeah, so scientists kind of interested in the study of the potential for life on other planets. One of the things you'll hear from them is this idea of a kind of Goldilocks zone, which is a region in every kind of solar system where it's not so close to the sun that the planet would basically be so burning hot that it wouldn't be able to sustain life, but at the same time not too far away where it would basically be too cold to really potentially sustain anything. And within that kind of zone, you have that what they call the Goldilocks zone. Obviously, it's based on the children's story. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. That's swathe of space where any planet within that could theoretically be in just the right position to for kind of life-giving or life-conducive physical properties to actually develop. But of course, the thing about that is that although scientists talk about the Goldilocks zone, that's not the only place where theoretically life could evolve on other planets. And if you look at our own solar system, there are candidates for potential locations where there might be life, which technically don't fall into the Goldilocks zone at all. So people talk, for example, about Europa, which is one of, I think, Jupiter's moons, and from what from scientific study and from probes that have been sent out that far into the solar system, what we kind of believe is to be the case is that Europa, I say believe to be the case as though it's not confirmed, but I think it is actually technically confirmed by the sort of evidence that has been accumulated. But in essence, Europa has this kind of icy shell, and it's believed that underneath that you have liquid oceans. And here's the thing, with a celestial body like Europa, if you have liquid oceans, things like that, then in theory you could have things like tidal heating, where the movement of all that water as a result of tides caused by maybe like gravity from other celestial objects near Europa, namely things like Jupiter, that could result in kind of a level of friction that generates a certain level of heat, even though Europa is very far away from the sun. So in that case, that might be what sustains that liquid ocean, what stops it from freezing over. And on top of that, there might be other sources of heat on a planet like that as well, like hydrothermal vents, for example, down on the seabed, basically underwater volcanic spouts and stuff like that release geothermal energy, that release heat into the surrounding water. And so in theory you could have a situation where some form of life evolves close to that, in that that those kind of hydrothermal vents might create the sort of perfect conditions for some kind of life to flourish. Now, admittedly, that might not necessarily be complex life. It could just be microbial. It could be life that exists at the tiniest scale, but it would still be life in essence. And isn't that kind of fascinating to think about? That a celestial body like Europa, so far out from the sun in such a cold region of space, could still potentially have conditions that could harbour life. So yeah, very interesting stuff. But yeah, space research, absolutely love it. Fantastic subject area. It's fascinating, and I love watching videos of it here on YouTube. So yeah, that was quite a rambling discussion just there that I had. Went through all kinds of things, from TED Talks to Wired to criticising people who criticise space research, through to rambling on about potential for life on other planets in the Goldilocks zone, Earth-like planets, Europa, etc., etc. You see, which probe actually is it that left the solar system? Was it a couple of years ago? Was it Voyager 1 or Voyager 2? I can't quite remember which one it was. One of them, not too long ago, actually left the solar system and is apparently now in deep space. So, yeah, fascinating stuff, really, isn't it? But getting back to the thing about Titan, I think it's hard for humans really to comprehend the physical distances that are really involved. I mean, I'll just refer you back to what I was saying a moment ago about the Dragonfly project, how from when it launches in 2027, it's estimated to take about 9 years just to get to where it needs to be. I mean, it's great if you're a scientist on that project, because you've basically got a job that is going to take you through now for a huge section of your life. A huge section of your career path is now decided. You're going to be involved with that project for ages yet. Yeah. But, I watched another video by... I don't know if actually I've talked about this one before. Another one from Wired with Jill Tarter, of the former director of the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And, she was one saying something very, very interesting, and which is absolutely true, really. The thing is, when it comes to space research and exploration, you've got to start thinking in cosmological timescales, or cosmic timescales, instead of in human timescales. Because humans, might only live for, at maximum about 100 years, tops. But of course, when you're dealing with potentially, travelling through space and stuff like that, you could be looking at timeframes of hundreds, thousands of years. And that's the issue. And certainly, when it comes to looking for evidence of life elsewhere on other planets, again, you've got to start thinking in those cosmic timescales. Because Jill Tarter, actually put it very interestingly, that in the total, if you were to sort of use an analogy for space, and that analogy you were to use was the ocean, and you were to ask how much have we actually explored. So using that ocean analogy, her analogy is basically that we've only explored about a hot tub's worth of the ocean. So that's her analogy for how much we've explored of space, and that gives an idea of, in the grand scheme of history, we've barely been looking. Sure, yes, there have been astronomers throughout human history. You go back to, ancient civilizations, they had astronomers who would look up at the stars and try and map out the constellations and whatever else have you. But that's a very limited form of exploration. That's just based on a human standing on the ground looking up into the sky. But in terms of actually going up there into space, that's only been ongoing since during the Cold War. So in the grand scheme of things, in terms of cosmic timescales, we've barely been looking. We've barely been exploring space. So there's so much more left to do. And that's what's exciting about it. So many possibilities. And that's why, I will never kind of understand that point of view that some people espouse, which is, what's the point of space research? And, what benefit does it bring us? Well, what do you mean, what benefit does it bring us? It brings us all kinds of benefits. There's all kinds of technologies that have resulted from space research and whatever else have you. It just occurred to me I'm actually kind of hanging around the same area here, not really doing anything in game, but yeah, it doesn't matter. It's fine. Oh, yes. But of course, if you accept a certain school of thought, the Earth is flat and it's all a lie, so whatever, yeah. No, we're not getting into that kettle of fish here. Empiricists and academics and people who believe in evidence and science, come on over to the General Red Strategist channel, we love you. Yeah. Everyone else, fuck off. No. I'm not that mean, don't you worry. I'm just joking. I'm just being my usual slightly cynical self at times. Right, what else actually do I find sometimes interesting about space research and stuff like that? I was actually, I once actually read some pretty curious stuff about exploration of Venus and potentially settling of Venus, because I was kind of flabbergasted a bit by some of the suggestions that people have made for how you would kind of settle Venus as a planet, theoretically speaking, if that was ever to occur. Because obviously the thing about Venus is it's a very hot planet, not just because it's close to the sun, or closer to the sun than Earth is, but also because its atmosphere, it has such very thick clouds that trap heat in, and thus, over time, it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. But there were kind of proposals for how could you design, say, a colony or a laboratory that you could place on Venus that would be able to stand up to that intense temperature, potentially even house an explorer or a team of humans or whatever. And that's just fascinating because some of the kind of proposals that kind of budding explorers came up with, things like, shipping so much kind of rocks and detritus up to Venus and literally piling it down through the atmosphere to create a mountain or a kind of elevation in terrain so high that it breaks through the cloud layer, so that then you can place kind of colonies or whatever on top of a mountain above that cloud layer, so that then it doesn't get caught in that heat trap. But it was crazy. Or alternatively, not that, maybe like some kind of colony or something that's suspended in air above the cloud layer. This all sounds like the realm of science fiction, but it's fascinating to read about because of these very sort of interesting ideas. Oh my god, my phone's ringing. 1 second, all. And back in. Right, here we are. Yes, phone call. No, nothing important though, that is. Just the old folks give me a ring to see how I'm getting on at the moment, as they do. Yes. So, yeah, like I say, science fiction stuff, that's what it kind of sounds like at the moment, but, this is research and ideas that are constantly ongoing. And at the end of the day, the very thought of exploring space would at one time have been akin to science fiction for many people, but of course now it's happened, so not science fiction anymore. Who knows what will happen? I mean, I know some proposals often are quite sort of very extravagant, very grand, and it's questionable whether they ever would necessarily prove to be anything, but you never know where technology may sort of go in science and whatever else have you. Okay, well, tell you what, I'm going to wrap up with this episode here, because I think I've been recording for a decent amount of time there. So that was a little bit of a rambling discussion there, but I thought it was an interesting one nevertheless. In that case, nothing else for me to say other than the usual outro materials. So, Facebook and Twitter links down below, along with a link to my propagandist channel for anyone interested. If you enjoyed, don't forget, leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. But other than that, I'm signing off now. Goodbye, everybody. Oh, hello. Are you the humpback whales that we saw earlier in the playthrough? And I look like it. Oh. Whoa! That's a frigging blue whale and a half! Bloody hell, that's big! Now I get a sense of perspective. Zooming out, holy shit! Good god! The music could not be more fitting. Wow. How deep are we going?